right, well, welcome to episode 25 of The Critical Social Worker, a revolutionary storytelling podcast. My name is Christian Ace Stettler, and I am a professor in the social work department at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. And this morning, as you can always see, my backgrounds are always changing these days. Kind of living nomad right now. But this morning, I'm broadcasting live from Jewel Lake in Anchorage, Alaska. We've been real busy going all over the place. We had a family vacation in the West. It lasted like a month with the family, went to Disneyland and all that stuff, moved out of Juneau, and now we're in the process of relocating to Fairbanks, at least temporarily, maybe longer. We're trying to figure life out. But right now, after me and Alicia both presented at the NASW conference in Anchorage last week, and we were exhausted after everything that we had going on, and so we've been working out of this nice little Airbnb, like as you can see behind me by Jewel Lake, and it's a beautiful time here in Anchorage. Temperature's still warm enough not to be freezing. The trees changing colors. It's just been a real blessing to spend the week here in this house and walking around Anchorage. It's a great time of year. And this morning, I'm also joined by my former student and now friend and colleague, G. Ford. He's broadcasting or joining us all the way from sunny Honolulu, Hawaii, on the beautiful island of Oahu. G was born in Atlanta, Georgia. He grew up with two sisters and a mother and a father that were both hardworking. Like many future social workers, G struggled in school, which eventually led him to try out military school. And afterwards, he went back home, bounced around from job to job until he had his first child. From then on, his life was stabilized for a little bit until he was expecting his second child, which is when he decided that he needed some more stability for himself and his family, and he thus joined the Marine Corps in 2005. After 12 years and 4 deployments, things took a turn in his life and he decided to change paths. He stayed in Hawaii after being discharged and went back to school for social work at Hawaii Pacific University, which is where our paths intersect. We'll talk about it a little bit later. But he earned his BSW in 2019 and his MSW in 2021. He's since then earned his licensed LSW license. What is that? Licensed social worker, and is now currently working in dialysis. G is currently in supervision pursuing his LCSW. So we're going to talk about that path a little bit later. But I just want to say what's up. How's it, G? How's it over there in sunny Honolulu this morning?
Aloha, Christian. It's good. As you can see, sunny like always. Don't really get the season like you all do, but it's doing good over here.
Yeah, I think that it's kind of crazy. It's a blessing that, we're both in beautiful locations, separate parts of the world, north, and I guess you get down by the equator. I'm way up in the north. But, I think that we overutilize technology these days, but it's sure a blessing for us to be able to connect like this, clear, high definition video, and, hopefully sharing that with some other folks. Well, all right. I can't wait to get down to it and talk some story with G, but there's a few things that we got to cover first. First things first, the critical social worker is supported by the social work department at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. However, we just want to be clear that any opinions, and G and I could be very opinionated. We were just connected in Vegas not too long ago when I was on my trip, and we can be opinionated folks. And so I just wanted to, make it clear that any opinions that we express on this show, whether from me or G or even a listener calling in, they don't necessarily reflect the values of the social work department, College of Liberal Arts, or the University of Alaska Fairbanks, or any of its affiliates, or any other organization, or anyone else besides us. The opinions and ideas shared on this podcast belong to the speakers alone. And that's important. If you don't like something that one of us says, I invite you to take it up with us personally. You can email me at Stettler, CASTETTLER @alaska.edu. We'll get G to share his info later. You could also call in on the podcast or use the chat box if you have anything. But yeah, if you have an issue, take it up with us as individuals. Our opinions are our own and do not represent any other organization. I will take just a quick moment and share the mission statement of the Critical Social Worker. So the Critical Social Worker podcast unfolds unique stories and diverse perspectives to foster critical dialogue, empathy, and understanding for all listeners. Through storytelling grounded in social work values, we aim to change ourselves and the world one story at a time. And one of the underlying themes of that mission statement is obviously the idea of telling stories. Well, we here at the Critical Social Worker, we believe that each individual is multi-layered with unique life experiences. We want to help unfold some of those layers through stories we can learn and grow from, stories that help build critical consciousness. All right, and like I said a few times here, this podcast is supported by the social work department at the University of Alaska Fairbanks, where I work. And I just want to give a shout out to the UAF social work program. It's where I graduated with my BSW, and there's a reason that I returned. It's an excellent program, and the first thing that I want to mention is just the level of care that the faculty provide for students at the social work department at UAF. I've been a part of several social work programs, and I don't want to diss any of the other programs, but by far, and I'm not exaggerating here at all, by far, my experience at University of Alaska Fairbanks Department of Social Work was the most attention I ever received as a student, as an undergraduate, graduate student. I feel like I learned the most. It was a transformative experience for me. So you have attentive and caring faculty. We have extremely low tuition costs. I'm not going to go through the exact prices, but I dare you to go and search for like some of the other online programs, like let's say USC Social Work or something like that, and see what it costs in comparison to an online degree from UAF, Department of Social Work. And those prices are going to be much lower. And, a lot of the problems, like, for example, when I attended University of Hawaii at Manoa, the cost for out-of-state tuition was like, I think it's like 4 or 5 times the amount it is for in-state tuition. We don't have to worry about that at the UAF Department of Social Work. You can receive in-state tuition from anywhere in the world. So whether that means you're in Anchorage, Fairbanks, you're local in Fairbanks, we have a lot of students from rural Alaska, or if you're in Honolulu with G, you can earn your degree and take classes too for the same cost as the folks in state. So it's a big plus. So check us out there. The reason that you should think about checking out UAF Social Work is its connection and its emphasis on indigenous ideas, indigenous peoples, indigenous ways of thinking, being, paying our respects in that way, but it also contributes vitally to our transformative experiences that we aim to provide here at the UAF Department of Social Work. And so if you're interested at all, the best way to find us, just Google us, UAF Social Work, or look us up on Facebook. I'm not going to give you all the links and everything right now. Just check us out by looking us up. All right, well, what about you? Do you got a story to tell? Are you interested in coming on the show as a guest to tell your story, to share your stories? We believe that everybody has a unique story to tell. So if you're interested in coming on the Critical Social Worker and sharing your story on our platform, I'd love to hear from you. And like I said, you could look me up. You could reach me at Instagram at A Conscious Party, or you can find me, you can email me at C.A. Stettler, Castettler, at alaska.edu. And just got to give a quick disclaimer. If you want to come on the show, you have to wait until at least the spring because we got a killer lineup for this fall. G's our third guest this fall, and it's just taken off from there. We've got some great guests, so I'm completely booked up until at least December, and I might take a break, so maybe January. But if you're interested, I'd definitely love to hear from you. And the last thing I wanted to talk about in this little briefing of the podcast is that I wanted to say that if you find value in the Critical Social Worker, if you find value in our podcast, if you listen to us and you'd like to support us in any way possible, I don't want to ask you for any money or anything like that. The only thing I want to ask you for is that you follow us on our platforms and you leave us reviews, like our episodes, things like that. Just show us some love in that way. You can do that on Spotify. You can do that on Apple. You can follow our YouTube channel. We got a pod page. I think we're even on Google Podcasts. I don't have control of even everywhere that we're at. We're out there. So, and if you've left a review on Apple or Spotify in the past, I ask you to go and do it again because we were on the call-in platform. Didn't work out for us. We've upgraded. We're now broadcasting via Riverside, hosted on Podbean. So if you left a review on Apple or Spotify before, it's probably gone now. So because we had to migrate the podcast over to a new platform. So give us a review again if you can. And look forward to hearing from you and seeing what your comments are. With that all being said, I think that it's time for us to get this conscious party started for real. Hey, yo, everyone, gather around. It's story time. Brought to you by the University of Alaska Fairbanks, Department of Social Work, and a Conscious Party Productions. You are listening to The Critical Social Worker, a revolutionary storytelling podcast.
A conscious party.
Revolutionizing our minds,
Elevating our consciousness.
changing our worlds.
Your story.
My story,
Our story.
All right. Well, welcome officially to episode 25 of The Critical Social Worker, a revolutionary storytelling podcast. I'm here with my good friend, former student, and now I guess I should say my former student, now colleague and friend, G. Ford. So we're going to get down to it. But, you know, I always kind of open up with a little bit of a story. And I was thinking, you know, where, as I mentioned earlier, where G and I, where our paths intersected. I don't even know what year that was, like 2000. I guess it was like 2019 because it was the year before the pandemic. So we had a full school year together, academic. I was teaching adjunct at Hawaii Pacific University. G was a bachelor's student, and I had him for 2 years. So we went through some good things together in class. We went through the pandemic. The pandemic hit right in the middle of our final semester together. And the story I kind of want to tell is one that I've been unfolding throughout multiple episodes on the podcast, and that is the one where the one that intersects with talking circles. Let me say that, talking circles. So my experience when I was a student, a BSW student at the University of Alaska Fairbanks, I was able to participate in a couple programs called the Rural Human Services Program and the BSW, the Bachelor's of Social Work cohort, rural cohort. And so I was living up in Barrow, Alaska, aka Utqiagvik, Alaska, way up on the Arctic Ocean. Like literally, my apartment was on the Arctic Ocean. But anyway, somehow I got invited to participate in this program called the Rural Human Services Program, and I went in there had no idea what to expect. And I arrived, and there were about 30 of us in that cohort, that Rural Human Services cohort, and I was the only guy. There was another guy that joined later who's now considered my brother, Mr. UL. But then I was the only white guy. I was the only white person in the group. It was exclusively Alaska Native folks from around rural Alaska. So I still don't really know how I got invited or involved in that program. But the main method of instruction is talking circles. And I'd never participated in anything like a talking circle, you know, beyond like, you know, facilitating makeup groups with kids when I used to work with them. And I just made up my own, which were similar to a talking circle, but not the same. And when I first participated in those talking circles, I literally hated them. I thought they went on forever. Folks talked too long. I looked at it as people were complaining and whining. I was hungry. I felt like I had other things to do, like homework, all that kind of stuff. Like I really didn't like it. But to make a long story short, the longer that I participated in those talking circles, the more that they grew on me and the more that they proved to be a transformative experience for me. And you'll hear it I use this a lot, you hear it in our opening jingle, you know, your story, my story, our story. Well, that's what it was like when I showed up to the Rural Human Services Program. It was like me, this white guy who kind of like, you know, put myself into the wall, trying not to be noticed that much, listening to a bunch of what I considered other people's stories that I didn't really intersect with mine. Not saying I didn't care at all, but I didn't really feel involved in them, and I felt like there was a gap there. But the longer that I participated in the talking circles, the less it became my story and their story, or stories. It became our story, and we became interconnected. And I've come full circle with that as you look at it now. Now, I'm not teaching in the Rural Human Services Program, but I do teach in the BSW rural cohort, we use very similar methods. Matter of fact, I just facilitated a cohort, an intensive cohort for a week, just a couple weeks ago in Fairbanks. Now we have sessions on Zoom once a week, which we use the talking circle very fruitfully. This is actually probably the class that it's been the most fruitful. And the reason for that is probably because for the first time, I have the privilege of having some elders in the classroom that help put us off, you know, set the tone for us, which has reverberated into what we got going on now. Anyways, I want to fast forward from my time as a BSW student to the time I moved on, got my master's, pursuing a PhD, and I found myself teaching adjunct, both for University of Hawaii at Manoa and for Hawaii Pacific University at the same time. And I remember the very first class that I taught. It was called Juvenile Delinquency. It was I took a class in the Department of Sociology, and I guess they saw something in me, and they asked me if I would teach this class, just out of the blue. So I teach this class, Juvenile Delinquency, and I just did it by the book pretty much. They had a syllabus, they had a textbook, your regular textbook, 13 chapters that meet the exact amount of the class. So we'd go through the chapters once by week, or week by week. I didn't like the way that it was going. I felt like we were just superficial. We weren't really getting anywhere. And I said, you know what? I got to introduce dialogue into this class. And so I remember standing up in this class at University of Hawaii, and I was like, I don't remember what it was about, but I shared some things, and I was like, I want to know what you all think about it. Let's hear your thoughts. And everybody, and this was like a real traditional type of class. Most of those students were like 18, 19, 20 years old. And they just looked at me like, what you mean? You want me to talk about this? Like almost everyone in the class. And so I sat there and I was saying to myself, like, what is wrong with this that I'm sitting here as a college professor trying to get, college students to participate in dialogue, and they just look at me like I'm crazy? It says, one, I think that it brought back to me the ideas of that there's something wrong with schooling if this is the way that it is. They just expect me to come, be like a banker, give them some money or some education or some knowledge. They're going to take it and then they're going to go away with it. Whereas I view education, is like most of the best information that I learned as a student and even as a professor is like through those interactions in between class, after class, before class, the discussions, the dialogue that sometimes happen in class. There's very little to do with me memorizing stuff from a textbook and then taking an exam or something like that. So moving forward just a little bit, I didn't introduce the talking circles in that class, but I did get those students to start talking a little bit, one by one. It's funny how when one person does it, then it kind of liberates others to do so. But in my classes, my social work classes, at the same time I was teaching at Hawaii Pacific University, and I had a whole cohort before G, the year before. So my second year there, it's like, you know what, I'm going to introduce the talking circles. So I conferred with a few elders that I knew, just to make sure that I was being, I'm not inappropriately appropriatizing or appropriating, indigenous methods that I don't have a right to, and felt like I had a lot of support. I felt like we weren't being specific with ceremonies or anything, and so we went with it, and I introduced the talking circles into the curriculum, into the syllabus, and we used them every class. And that's where, G and his cohort comes in, because right now I'm also, in addition to a professor of social work at UAF, I'm also a PhD student, and I'm studying, my research centers around talking circles and whether they can produce critical consciousness in the undergraduate classroom, multicultural classroom. And the whole reason that I was motivated to do that in the first place was my experience in that first cohort. I used it in G's cohort, I think, like I said, 2019 or so. And they gave me such positive, G and you and your group, you all gave me such positive feedback about how the talking circles worked, or were working, that it motivated me to continue using them. I was also taking a graduate course, a research course, and so I did a little pilot project in G's class where we, at the end of the semester, I don't know if you remember, G, but we had a voluntary focus groups where we talked about the talking circles and how they went. And my favorite memory from that is actually from Hector. You remember Hector? Hector was the funny guy in our cohort. But Hector's this older guy, and he was, I was explaining what critical consciousness meant, and I gave him the definition of it. I don't remember the exact definition, but I gave the definition to him, and he's like, what you just said, that's what talking circles do, exactly. And I was like, well, I said, that's pretty good evidence that it's doing what it was set out to do if he's saying it does exactly that. But I got some really good feedback for you all, and I used that for a pilot study, which launched me into not only my research project, but how it gave me confidence to continue utilizing the talking circles in that way, because they worked. And, they made the experience for students, professor, teacher, student, which we're all the same in that, I believe anyways. But it made the experience of sitting in a classroom together for 3 hours a week, made it meaningful, it made it transformative. Like I said, it built critical consciousness. And so yeah, G, I want to bring you in, and we're going to dive deep into your educational pathway and to get to where you're at now. But I was wondering if you could share just a little bit about your experience. And, I know you have mixed feelings about education and school. Like we even differ on some things. You don't like to read, I like to read. So we're on polar opposites, in that regard. But when it comes to something like, how we conduct ourselves in the classroom and how we really how we find meaningful ways to learn, we seem to be on the same page on that. And you've always been a vocal supporter of what we were doing in the classroom. And so I was just wondering if you would mind sharing a little bit about your experience and what the talking circles meant for you in the class, and kind of compare that or juxtapose it with some of the other experience, where you felt like you had to, maybe it was like heavy on reading and exams or something like that. And what's the difference there for you?
For me, it's funny because as I'm listening to your story of when you was telling about when you first was trying to teach some of your first classes and stuff, and you tried to engage the students. The students looking at you like, so I'm supposed to talk? No, you the guy standing in the front. You supposed to talk, right? So, not even being able to just be vocal and speak up. This originally thinking about the talking circles and then listening to that experience. The first thing that comes to mind is the proof is right there in the pudding, right? Everybody is different, literally, but everybody learns different. Everybody communicates differently. Everybody has different skills. People are good at certain things. People are not so good at those things. And so kind of before I kind of share my complete experience, I kind of think about some of our cohort, right? When we was going through the BSW program. And we had some in there that, writing, oh my gosh, like put me to shame. I didn't even want, like I remember one time I got paired up and that person was supposed to be my writing partner. And I felt shame. I'm like, man, what am I going to do to help? I can't help you. You know what I'm saying? You doing this all to me. You helping me out. So, but if you had that same person and they had to stand up and speak or present or share something, they freeze up and start shaking because they couldn't even speak in person because their skills weren't there. So, I just look at those opposites, initially to say, listen, why are we focused on one way of learning, one way of teaching, one way of things having to be this way, and that's the only way you're being graded? And the talking circles just really just opened my mind up to, not even open my mind up, but just open it up for me to actually be successful and be able to feel like I was a part of school and I'm actually learning something because I learned differently. So through all the classes, when I compare it to the talking circles, like I didn't learn very much. I wrote so many papers. I don't recall any of the things that I actually really concretely learned out of the papers. I was just talking about stuff that I already kind of knew. I read a lot, but I wasn't really retaining all of that because for me, I'm more of a vocal person. So when it came to being exposed to the talking circles, first I was just like, man, I'm happy I ain't got to keep writing papers in this guy class. So I was excited. But being into the talking circles, actually, it did really show me that there was so much more ways of being able to learn. So what the talking circles showed me in that point in time is that, one, people was getting the chance to have that ability to share what they wanted to share in a way that they wanted to share in a safe place that was okay for them to do so. They also had the time that they had to sit there and listen to other people's stories, right? And that experience was really good because it wasn't something that was written in a book, that was put in the curriculum and said, jam this down, this is what you should learn. It was, this is what real people are experiencing. This is what real people are learning. These are skills that other people have that I may not have, and they're sharing these things with me that may help me in the future, and vice versa. So the talking circles is really followed the concept of what they were saying, that they wanted to decolonize the social work, decolonizing it in the sense of let's spread this, let's open this up and make it more diverse for people with different skills. And that's what the talking circle kind of did.
Yeah, I like that. A couple of things that you mentioned, when speaking of decolonizing the classroom or whatever, one of the biggest issues I've had with that kind of movement over the years now, it's been involved for quite a while, is that they'll take they'll want to decolonize the classroom, but to do so, they use traditional methods to do it, meaning like they stand up there and they lecture you and they tell you what you're supposed to know and what you're supposed to do and what to think. Whereas to me, like if you want to use that term, decolonizing the classroom, that comes from like participating in things like talking circles. And it really doesn't matter what you say if you use the same method that's always been done from the tale of time with Western education. And there's a separation between the teacher or the instructor or the professor and the students. And the other thing that I liked that you mentioned was, you mentioned something like becoming a part of it. And it's really amazing how transformative it is. And I mean, you can see this in real time, like especially with shyer students that are shy or that aren't good with speaking. You can see that once they become a part of the education that you're trying, the educational experience that you're trying to achieve, their eyes start to open up and they start to transform right before your eyes. And this person that was shy and didn't have anything to say and didn't, was very reserved and sharing personal experiences or their ideas, like they wake up because they became a part of it. You know what I mean? Like I'm just imagining the faces of our cohort. How many students do we have? Like 10 or something like that?
Something
Not
like
that
that.
many. But like I can picture like 4 or 5 faces of people that just came alive when they came, they were asleep, and when they left the class, they were awake. And so that's what keeps it going for me, if you know what I mean. So I like that you said that, becoming a part of it. And you hear that a lot with indigenous, ideas or indigenous methods, is becoming a part of it, the interconnectivity. I think when we're talking about some of those other classes where you're supposed to read all this stuff and whether it's write a paper or take exams or whatnot, we don't feel like we're a part of it. We feel like we're doing what somebody else told us to do. And I'm not saying you can't get anything meaningful about it, because you can build writing skills, and you can pick up information and things like that. But you don't necessarily feel like you are a part of it. And so that's always been, since the very beginning, one of my biggest goals as an instructor, as a teacher, a professor, and as a student, but is to make us all become a part of it, so we're all integrated within it. Does that make sense?
That makes 100% sense. And in that, what you were saying, I thought it really kept keying in me, is that what it did was it allowed the creativity of the individual. Given that open space gave that individual to be as creative as it was for their experience, whatever it was receiving, whatever they was sharing, but it became their experience and they created that experience, versus the school creating the experience and saying, this is what we want that to look like for you. And this is something that you're actually paying for. This actually is our money as students, whether they have student loans, they're still repaying it back or whatnot. Doesn't matter. It's their money, it's their experience. And so it should be opened up in a broad sense to where you should feel comfortable to make that experience yours. I mean, we are social workers. We don't go and then we write an intervention and say, hey, here you go, client, read that, and then everything's going to be okay. No, we speak to each other, we interact, we feel, we catch the energy in the room. So if the only thing that we're learning to do is sit there and just listen all day, I mean, that's almost the social worker is kind of fostering, is that they expect that their clients will just sit there and listen to them all day, which we know is the complete opposite of social work.
Yeah. Well, we actually have a quick question from coming up in the chat already. Anna asks, how can you incorporate talking circles in your work outside of the classroom? And I think that's one of the challenging sides to that. And the same thing with the classroom is that a talking circle, for example, I'm not saying you never do it, because some situations change, but it's not something that you typically put like a time constraints on, for example. And that led to us and to other classes I've had. Sometimes you go over because people are still got things to talk about, and if we always say that my old mentor, grandmother Rita Blumenstein, would always say, unless we unburden our hearts, we can't think clearly, right? So if someone's heart's burdened, we need to get that out of the way, or else we're really wasting our time in the classroom. We got to unburden ourselves. And but part of that thing is time, right? So when we go, one of my biggest criticisms about social work in the present is it all revolves around billing, right? I mean, even if you were to go see a therapist today and talk to them about your intake, there's always the script that comes up. I know this could be uncomfortable to talk about, and I hate to bring it up, but we got to make sure it's paid for. So let's talk about insurance and all of that. And I'm not saying, obviously, we need to get paid as social workers. That's important. but it always seems like it's the primary vehicle, and like with insurance companies and whatnot, kind of dictating what can and can't be paid for. Well, how the hell are you going to bill for something like a talking circle? And what if it lasts a long time? You know what I mean? Whereas we're only billing for 1 hour and things like that. It provides complications, right? So if you wanted to implement a talking circle or talking circles into your job as a clinical therapist, you might have to find creative ways to do it because you might not have the time that it requires. You might not be able to bill, depending on, or at least bill for the whole time. So, you know, it's complicated. Like, what do you think? You work in dialysis, which is a different environment in itself. But do you have any ideas how you would be able to incorporate something like that in the, touch and go atmosphere, like working in dialysis?
Well, definitely. And actually, it's been done. And we actually thinking about restarting something else. And it's kind of in the form of like a support group, right? So, but in support groups, it's kind of in the sense of a talking circle, but the talking circle is controlled and in a different way, right? So like the kind that we did when we were pass something around, that when that person had that thing inside of their hand, that was their moment to speak, so that way they have control of the room. Right now they're speaking, nobody interrupts. So you can utilize that also too, like for example with some of the people that we have inside of dialysis, and it has been done. Again, we're thinking about doing it also. And so what that looks like is literally having support groups where people get a chance to share what their experiences is. Because inside of dialysis, and this is not to insult anybody's intelligence, but if you don't know, dialysis is at the point where people have end-stage renal disease. So basically the kidneys are no longer functioning. And the kidneys are the most one of the most important organs inside the body because it filters all of the toxins and everything out, and then it comes out in your urine, and the waste comes out of your body. So basically, if the kidney is not working, the waste isn't getting clean, and then all the toxins and stuff remain in your body. All right, and so also too, what you cannot do, majority of people cannot use the bathroom, or if they do use the bathroom, it's very little the amount that they can actually come out. So with that being said, they have to minimize the amount of water that they drink. In fact, they're limited to about like 32 ounces of water in a certain time period because they can't get rid of the water. So the water overloads their body. So, I mean, you can kind of go and just look at end-stage renal disease and kind of familiarize yourself and understand it. But I just share that so you can kind of understand where this may help. You have some people that struggle with being able to not drink more water than is needed. So they come in fluid overloaded, and they risk a lot of different health complications by doing that. But having talking circles and being able to share people being able to share what they do and share how they're going through this journey, then people picking up, oh, wow, you know what? I didn't even think about that. Or that's something that I could use, or it maybe even normalizes the way that they are experiencing it. They feel like, oh, okay, you're having struggles with that too. And now inside of myself, I'm thinking and I'm listening, I'm struggling with that also. So now it's more normalized. So then we go back to what you said, the concept of the talking circles are, creating that connectiveness, and that sharedness, because it's a shared experience, regardless of what that looks like for each other. So that is one way it's been used in the field of dialysis, in the nephrology field, and that we are planning to do it in the future, utilize talking circles in the form of support groups to help our people. We get people that come in all the time. Every month we get like 22 people a month with all the clinics that we have around here, just our clinic alone, 22 more people roughly a month that is found with end-stage renal disease and are brand new in this process. I was actually just doing an orientation with the lady yesterday, and she was sharing how for the last year, they had told her she needed to start dialysis, and she refused to the point where she almost died. And it's like, okay, I have to do it. Now she's doing it. She feels so much better in doing that. What if she was introduced to a talking circle 6 months ago? Maybe she wouldn't got to that near-death experience, right? Because she would be able to connect and relate with other people that are going through the same thing. So that's one way that you can use it. That's one way that it has been used in the field of dialysis.
Yeah, and one of the things that I'm always, I don't know why I keep being surprised by it, but I always surprised, is that when you utilize some kind of dialogic method like talking circle or something similar, I always think that certain populations or certain people, like they aren't going to want to talk, but they do. And like it shows that many people that we as social workers not have to deal with, but that we deal with, that we work with, many of them have just been itching for somebody to talk to, for somebody to share how they've been thinking, how they've been feeling, and they may have went through their whole life. I've mentioned this previously too, but working with domestic violence offenders in jail, I was like, these guys are not going to want to talk to me at all. But when I went in there and started talking with them, it was exactly the opposite, and they almost all of them, were thrilled to have somebody to talk to and to share their experiences and whatnot. And many of them explicitly stated that with me, that nobody had ever listened to them before. And then also when I was doing my undergraduate practicum for University of Hawaii, I did it at Kualoha Olamau, and it's basically a methadone clinic. And long story short, when I was doing my practicum / working there, there were several. We called them hamana, which kind of means student in Hawaiian, but our clients are hamana. Several of the hamana had been kicked out of the different groups that they have going there available to the client / hamana. And I was talking to my supervisor, and I was saying, well, why don't you give me a chance with them and let me host a group with them? I always like the challenge of working with what they deem to be the difficult clients, because I was a difficult person. So I feel like, and honestly, with my personality and the way I roll, I actually experience less trouble from those troubled clients, or whatever we're calling them, than I do have conflicts with other staff members or something that we don't see eye to eye. But anyway, so I had these group, I think there were like 8 or 9 of them, but they'd been kicked out of all the other groups. And I just introduced the talking circle. We'd meet once a week in the morning, and we did other things as well, but we had a talking circle every week. And I got one example is there was this guy that was, that these other counselors were telling me, you got to be careful with him. He's going to be disruptive, and he was basically the worst of the worst, is what they were telling me as far as facilitating groups. Well, like after 2 weeks of participating in the talking circle, this guy was showing up to set up the tables, the chairs, making coffee, and there to share first thing, to share deeply and thoughtfully. And I just think it speaks to we as busy professionals, busy people in this Western world, like sometimes we just don't take the time to talk and to listen, if that makes sense. And that goes as well in social work. Oftentimes a therapist, for example, an LCSW, licensed clinical social worker, their schedule would be so packed that they would never have the time to really, take the extra effort or the extra time to listen to someone. They've got an hour to do so, or maybe 50 minutes, because they got 10 minutes to put in their notes and get to the next person. And so that's not on the individual therapist. It's on the way that we do things. We got to slow down as social workers and like deprofessionalize the field a little bit. You know what I mean? Too many boundaries are up for us to make that connection and becoming a part of it, like we were talking about with the class. We got to have a chance to slow down. And I know Alicia worked in your job. My wife, Alicia, worked in your job previously. And I think that was one of the things that she would always critique is, it feels like I've got so many people to see and, so many things to do that we just don't have a time to slow down. Is that how you still feel working in dialysis, or you feel like you get a time to slow down and have a chance to listen to some of those individuals once in a while? Like, how big is your caseload?
Well, my caseload is bigger than it should be. So in the clinic that I have, I'm carrying a caseload on average about 240. Um, they say patients, I say people. 240 people inside of our clinic. So yeah, a lot. We're supposed to have 2 social workers that are there. We actually finally just hired another social worker after 2 years of me being there by myself. So yeah, that is my experience, because I really completely enjoy the interactions with them, because it's completely different from like when you think of a hospital setting where people come in with an injury or whatever's going on, but it's in and out. So, basically outpatient service is what you're doing. They trying to make sure that they can go home and be stable. But in dialysis, these people on dialysis for the rest of their life until they either decide to do dialysis at home, they decide to, or if they get chosen for a kidney transplant, or they eventually just pass away, right? So you kind of build like a family with these people, and I really enjoy just being able to talk to them. I see them every day. This is one part of their life that's kind of the dreaded part, of their life. So we try to make that experience a little bit more pleasant. So I've had to actually learn how to balance um, having to do things that are regulated because I can't get away from that. I have to do the regulated things from CMS, Medicare, Medicaid, who dictate what we have to do for people. And then there's other things that they would like to see happen, and I push that to the side and I go make time for my people. But I do agree, unless we force that in which I have actually consciously done, so that way I can spend the time with people, I wouldn't be able to spend the time that's needed. And I wouldn't be able to sit down and just talk. And they all come to me and say, I didn't expect for you to really fix anything. I'm just happy that you just sat down and just listened to me. So I was able to share this. So yeah, you're right. We kind of got to slow this down and be able to give the space for people to be able to talk with us and be able to share the things they are. Stop making it as rigid and as so formal. We think about it, we talk about it as social work. We look at everything as nothing is formal, right? Nothing is rigid. Everything kind of tests the challenges. So why in the world did we structure in the way that we provide our services that way? It's completely contradicting what the whole goal is. But yes, I do agree. There's so many different requirements that really is kind of money related, really money driven. So whether they can get the money so that way they can keep profit and make even more money, keep these businesses and stuff and these companies running well. I mean, that's the reason why we're having to do all these paperwork and all this other things just to justify what it is. But the paperwork doesn't fix anything. It's my interaction with them that fixing anything. So let's get that time back.
Yeah, exactly. I think, that's the heart of it when, for example, when like capitalism or insurance companies are dictating the services that we can provide. Well, that's backwards because there's nothing that doesn't mix or that has or is supposed to have different values than an insurance company and social work. Social work values. They have different values. They have different goals and whatnot, and it just doesn't work out. And I'm really sad to see the direction that the field of social work is going as far as being over professionalized. Everything. Even was one of my criticisms when I was, going to school for my MSW was that I felt like the only things that we were being trained to do was either be a caseworker or a therapist. And I'm not dissing those jobs. I'm just saying like I always had different ideas about social work more as a fluid, malleable, field of work that you could shape it. You had the power to shape a little bit more, but you have very little power to shape. Matter of fact, the biggest reason I went to school was that I used to supervise a juvenile treatment facility. And I'd always say to myself, wow, we did some great things and it was such a great experience, but you had all these ideas for how you could do it better and do it differently. And I had to be totally disillusioned with all that going through school and becoming a professional because there's really no space in the field for the ideas that I had. They didn't fit into what you could bill for insurance. A lot of those things would be just considered way outside the status quo, way outside of the norms. And I'm not saying all this stuff is impossible, but it just makes me sad the way that the field of social work is becoming so over-professionalized and dictated by other powers that be that don't have anything to do with the localized communities and whatnot. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I definitely do know what you mean. And it's like you're right about it. And I don't know why I'm being drawn right now in this conversation to just the money drive and what that looks like, but just kind of even what you were sharing about being able to do it differently or to be able to practice or do the interventions with the people that needs the help differently, right? And it doesn't have to be structured the way it is. Brings me back to when I was with Adult Friends for Youth. Adult Friends for Youth was actually a non-profit organization, right? So we're not driven by money. Of course, they needed the money to operate, but the goal wasn't to make money. So what did that do? That gave them the flexibility to practice social work in the way that they wanted to. And so what we did was we had groups inside of the schools that was working with our troubled youth, and our troubled youth, they was out there. You can't just reach them by some of the simple methods or some of the basic theoretical perspectives of interventions that was just kind of been sent down to us through our curriculums and things. You had to really get out there and kind of evolve and kind of go to where they're at, And when I say that, it goes back to, start where the client is at. Well, then give me the opportunity to do that. So we had to be in the neighborhoods where they're fighting each other, where they over there, dealing whatever they're dealing and stuff. We had to actually go find them out, wherever they're at because they're in trouble. And, the police is out there. It's just all these different scenarios and situations. And so I'm trying to draw this to say is that, that money kind of not having control over what that looks like would give the flexibility. So we come back and we look at it and say, maybe we got to pull the money out of the equation. Does that help? Not really sure. I don't have that answer.
Yeah, money, money, money. And it's an important topic because, we as social workers, as professionals, people trying to make their way in the world, we got to make money too, right? So it's another thing is I feel like insurance companies and whatnot, and they're basically taxing us, social workers. Anyways, let's get off of that topic and let's circle back because we never did what I wanted to do at the beginning. And let's talk about your path. We have, a lot of the people that are going to be listening to this are going to be students themselves, including the ones in my class. And so, let's go back. Let's circle all the way back to before you went to HPU to get your degree in social work. What did that look like for you? What made you just walk us through when you're in Honolulu and you're saying to yourself, I'm going to go back to school. I want to be a social worker. Why did you do all that? And how did you get to being a BSW student at HPU at Hawaii Pacific University?
Well, so that transition came after I was transitioned out of the Marine Corps, and kind of what preceded me leading to there was I was, kind of going through a few things in that stage of life. I was challenged at that point in time. Was recently divorced, kind of dealing with some other different things that's happened in the past and stuff. And so I was trying to seek mental health services as well, right? And I started seeking the help that they was providing for us, and it just felt like these people did not get it, or they couldn't connect, or just like the things that I would try to express to talk about. It was weird because I could feel that it was kind of not really received in the way that I felt like it should. So I didn't feel that connection with the people that were provided for me. And so at that point in time, I kind of set the seed in there for me to say, you know what, I want to try to do something differently to kind of impact that, right? I've always helped people. I've always helped my Marines. I was a victim advocate at one point in the Marine Corps. I was a family readiness officer. So those kind of experiences had already kind of fostered me into a realm of social work, but I just didn't see and I wasn't sure what that was going to look like. So when I got out of the Marine Corps, I know I wanted to provide some type of form of services back to people and to veterans. And so that kind of led me to thinking about counseling, and that's why I went into HPU. Not really fully. I mean, I know what a social worker was, but it wasn't like it's something that I knew every aspect of how we operated social work and influenced it and the impacts that we make. So I went there directly knowing I wanted to be a social worker, though. So I found a social work program, started going through it, but then it started to enlighten me on how connected I was with this profession. And then it started to drag me all the way back through just my life journey. All the struggles that I've had back in the days, all the people that actually was there to prevent me from being in the two places where we see a lot of our Black brothers, in jail or dead, and people that were there, to kind of stem in the right direction, or the interventions were there. And it didn't look like how, like we was talking about, this structured way of me having to sit there with a therapist and talk with them. No, it was the other creative methods that people did, the outreach to help push us through. And I started to put all that together, and I started to think about my time in the Marine Corps, and I was like, wow, actually that's the kind of stuff I was doing for my guys, while I was in the Marine Corps, when it was, we on deployment in the middle of somewhere trying to stay alive, and their wife taking all their money and, running away, and they come back home with absolutely nothing. I got to help them deal with that, through that. I've had people who have been sexually assaulted and worse, and had them struggle through that. And I saw myself in those positions also, helping them through those struggles. And so when it was my turn to decide on what I wanted to do, I kind of already knew that was where I wanted to be, and social work defined what that looked like.
Yeah, well, take us back to your BSW. Take you about 4 years or so?
Yep, 4 years.
4 years. So
4 years.
What are some of the things that were most, let me ask a multifaceted question. What are some of the things that were the most meaningful for you that you're like, wow, that really changed me and helped me, shaped me into who I am, or who I have been becoming today? What are some of the things that you were like, I wish I could have spent my time differently? What are some things that, you wish you would have taken more advantage of as a student? when you look back, like just reflect on your experience as a bachelor student?
As a bachelor student, reflecting back, one, I appreciate having a very small cohort because that allow us the space to really connect with each other and learn each other. We have too many people in the room. It's just it makes it difficult for everybody to really connect with each other. So that was one of the biggest benefits was that our cohort was not extremely big. Like we said, I think it was 8 or 10 of us. So that was one thing. Another part of the program that really caught me, it was there were some professors who were there to press the boundaries, and you were one of them. And so within that, pressing those boundaries of the way that you guys decided that you was going to give us the educational pieces and what you wanted to steer us to learn, and at the same time, like we've spoken before, giving us the flexibility to also create the environment the way and get the experiences that we want to. That was another thing that I truly appreciated and was able that I kind of reflect back and say, that was another great part. And it was the people, like I said, you and a few others who, had the courage to want to challenge just the structure of the way that it was. Some of the things that I didn't wasn't that I didn't like anything. I feel like I get a really good experience from everything, whether it's good or bad. I take something from it. Kind of what I'm saying there. But some of the stuff I didn't like was, again, following that rigid, structured way of you got to write this many papers and that's the only way that we're going to be able to grade you. And you got to take this test, and that's the only way we're going to be able to grade you to show whether or not you're good at all. And I go back to the same scenario that we mentioned before. I don't write that great. I've gotten better, so I do appreciate that skill. I'm not saying I didn't pull something from it. Like I mentioned, I pulled something from it, but that was just more of I developed more of a skill. I didn't learn anything from the things I was necessarily writing, and I wasn't really learning everything from just stuff being on a PowerPoint and stuff. So, the way that we evaluate people's skills and the way that our skills were being evaluated in the class, I felt like that kind of hindered my abilities to actually progress more or learn more or to be able to help someone else because I wasn't able to utilize the skills that was ingrained in me. So that was one thing. That was one of the things I really didn't like too much about that part. But honestly, like it was a really good experience. I really can't share too many negative things. Those would be some of the things that I would change. But all in all, I mean, coming from, I went from high school to the Marine Corps, spent a lot of time learning different ways inside the Marine Corps, which was obviously much different from college. So I don't have a lot of negative things, but it's a lot of things that I would change. It would be strictly just the way that you are accessing people's skills and allowing those skills to develop.
Yeah. I think that some of the problems I had, some of the things to do with earning my BSW and my MSW, along with being a professor in those situations, is like a lot of the assignments are really, I call it clunky. I don't hear anybody else use that word, but I call it clunky. Like I know this was in your day too, because I had to sign them off, but the learning contracts or the learning agreements, I can't really remember what we called them at HPU. But, back now it's changed a little bit. It's all digital, but for most places it's digital. But back then, you remember we had the packet of paper with everything listed out, and you had to fill everything out. And it was very complicated because it was like kind of trying to fit things in where they didn't fit in some cases. In some cases, they worked out really well. I can see exactly how I'm doing this at Adult Friends for Youth. But some of them, it's like I just have to kind of make something up or slide something in there to make it fit. And I think that's with a lot of things. I had other assignments that I can remember where it was like, I don't know, where it was trying to get you to connect like ethics from the NASW Code of Ethics to a dilemma or something that you were experiencing. And to me, it was kind of just backwards, as in that like you created this box and you want me to fit this experience into this box. But really, my experience is really multifaceted. And it doesn't really fit cleanly into this little box. And so more like if we had the talking circle or some kind of dialogic method where we could, untwine these experiences versus trying to make them fit into like you said, like something that somebody made beforehand that doesn't really, and especially like when we're in places like Alaska and Hawaii, things don't always fit cleanly into the way that they have them set out, you know? And so, like, even when we talk about, like, say, anti-racism, we dabbled with that a little bit, but, like, if you read the literature and stuff, most of it is, like, on a black-white paradigm, which doesn't fit Alaska or Hawaii. Not saying it doesn't fit, like, there's no places that it fit, but it really doesn't fit to the entire experience, like, as a whole. And so, you know, like I said, trying to jam those things into these boxes that they put in there. And, you know, I have one comment about it. I know the last time you and I chatted that you hadn't used the Chat GPT, the artificial intelligence chat box, whatever it's called. You know, I dabble with it for certain things. And I could definitely see how you could abuse things ethically with it. You know, you could basically have it write at least a portion of your paper. But it's going to wreck stuff like that clunky stuff for social work, because you could just literally copy and paste, you know, whatever it's trying to get you to fit in that box, whatever, and then say, like, hey, here's my experience. Can you fit it into this box for me? And it will do it for you. So the critical thinking skills that it's trying to get students to utilize, like, it's not going to work anymore once that, I mean, I'm sure every student's not using it at this point, but if they're not, they will. At some point, they're not going to continue, you know, pulling teeth when they realize that they can just have it all done, you know, pretty much seamlessly. So I don't know, they got to change that idea about social work, about how we, you know, challenge ethical principles with ethical dilemmas and the learning contracts and all of that stuff. We're going to have to find out new, innovative, and I use the word dialogic, like things that involve dialogue to handle those things, because the old way, it's, you know, the students are smart and they evolve quickly. They're going to utilize all that stuff and it's going to become pretty much meaningless pretty quick. Even like, you know, you think like a discussion board where it's like, you know, connect this ethical value to this. It could even have like a case study or something. Well, like literally people can paste that into Chat GPT and it could give them probably a better answer than they could have given themselves. So it's going to change everything in that regard. So I always say, like, I use the term revolutionary social work, which we maybe could talk about a little bit later. But, you know, a revolutionary social work means like changing things, challenging the way that things are done, and finding better ways, new ways to do them, or even old new ways to do them. But anyways, a little rant there. So moving on, like you got your BSW. Did you work at all after that, or you went straight to your MSW?
Actually, I worked in between that because I loved the organization that I was at. I was mentioning Dope Friends for Youth, so I would work 3 days a week, and then I was doing my practicum 2 days a week. So I'd worked and went straight into my MSW program, which I'm happy that I did, because had I took off, I mean, I probably would have came back, but it probably been a long time from then. So, I mean, I was already motivated. You know, everything was already streamlined. And I was like, you know what, let me just continue to keep pushing through. So, because I did better than I expected, actually, in the program, I was allowed to go into the advanced standing program, which I really appreciate that they offered that. Because for me, you know, at my age, I don't need to keep spending that many more years before it's time to hit the ground running. So, that was good that they opened that door. So yeah, I still was working, and at the same time going to school. And then as soon as I did graduate, I did immediately start going into the field, into different areas, until I found where I'm at right now.
Yeah, you know, that's a question that I hear students ask. It comes up all the time when you have like Q&A panels or whatever regarding BSW, MSW, is like, should I take some time off? Should I go into the field? I don't think there's an easy answer for that. I think like in your and I case, where we're non-traditional students, we're in our 30s or so, and we're going back to school. Well, for me, it made sense to get it done with, you know what I mean? Get it out of the way, taking any more. I'd already had a lot of work experience and whatnot, so I needed that MSW to really elevate myself. But then again, if you're like a traditional student, 18, 19, 20, 21, graduating at 22, you don't have any work experience, I could also see the benefit of, you know, going and utilizing your skills. But you could also do that afterwards. So, you know, and I think where we can move on now, which I think is an important part of our conversation, which can help people understand things. So BSW, 4 years. Many of the people listening to this podcast are going to be in the middle of that. When you're done, you can apply, during your senior year, really, you can apply to MSW programs, Masters in Social Work. And I mean, so obviously they can take as long as it takes to do them, but if you're doing them full time, you can either do if you don't have a degree in social work, or what, like your GPA is lower, there's certain requirements that have to be met, then you would have to take the 2-year program. But if you meet, I don't know what they're probably different for every program, but like a 3.0 GPA, you have a bachelor's in social work, you get your practicum, then you can just go to the advanced standing, which you can complete in 1 year. And for me, that meant, the MSW meant, I think it meant 5 graduate classes each semester, fall and spring, in addition to your graduate practicum, where you got to go, I can't remember how many hours, like 20 hours a week or something like that. Maybe it's 15. So it's a lot of work, that advanced standing. Let's talk about that for a minute. You did the same thing for you. Did you have to take 5 classes a semester?
Yeah, it was 5 class semester. And now, disclaimer: when I got into the MSW program, I stopped working. I was like, all right, there's enough. So I was like, it's kicking my butt. So in the MSW program, I at a certain point in time, I realized, okay, that wasn't working. So you're right. We had to pick up a extra class and still maintain the amount of hours that were required for the practicum, right? So yeah, that crunch, it's pretty intense. I would say it's pretty intense.
Yeah, no, I did mine. So I mentioned earlier that I was at the University of Hawaii at Manoa, and it's a weird thing. The out-of-state tuition is super expensive. It's like 5 times what the in-state tuition is. And in Hawaii, you can't earn residency while you're a student. So it's not like I could go there and take some classes and get residency. You have to not be in school for at least a year to achieve your residency. So the only way for me to be able to afford, because it was like 3 times the amount that even loans would give me, is how much it costed just for tuition. So I had applied for a bunch of graduate assistant positions that they'll waive your tuition. So on the last day before tuition was due, I got this job as a graduate assistant working with interprofessional education, where we'd go and do like simulations for, I don't want to talk about it too much, but basically there'd be like nursing student, a student that wanted to be a doctor, an MD. You'd have maybe even like like clergy and some students that were studying to be clergy members or pastors or whatever. And then you'd have social workers, and they'd simulate an event with actors from the acting department, where they'd be like, say someone's spouse got into an accident and they were basically brain dead, and so that you'd have the conversation with the spouse about the options. And so there'd be like I said, the doctor, the nurse, the social worker, maybe a clergy member, and they'd all work together. But anyways, I would host those things. But I would tell you, that was a hell of a lot of work for me to be going to a practice. I did at Kualoha, so it was like early morning methadone clinic. So I'd get up at like 4 a.m, go there, I don't remember my exact schedule, but 5 classes throughout the 5 3-hour classes each throughout the week, plus that job and trying to coordinate all that stuff. And I think during the end of it, I was teaching a little adjunct. So it's a hell of a lot of work. And I guess it's really cool that they help you to get through it in 1 year. But think about it, like how much do you miss on what you could have learned by taking all that stuff back to 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 back, while also trying to have a meaningful experience at your practicum, while also trying to maintain, your livelihood outside. And some of us, need extra income and have children to support and all that stuff. So in some ways, doesn't that seem like a lot? 5 3-hour classes, 5 graduate classes per semester, plus a practicum, and you're supposed to still maintain your sanity. I mean, like I said, it's cool that we can get through, but maybe, if that's the case, that the requirements are too stiff, because I just feel like it's inevitable that you're going to miss so much just cruising through all that. It's just kind of like doing what you need to do to check the box, check the box, check the box, check the box, so you can earn your degree, versus having those meaningful, transformative experiences that we were talking about.
And I have to agree with you there. And it kind of makes me kind of retract and think a little bit when you were just mentioning in the beginning, or at a point in time where some students right now may be thinking about whether they're going to take a break in between MSW, go out into the field, get some experience, and then come back and do the MSW, and then roll through. When I do think about the experience, it was like that. It was intense. It was quick, let's get to it, do this assignment, turn this in, let's go. And it's a blur. So even kind of when we was talking about what the experience was like, it actually blew by so quick. It's a little difficult to kind of remember what it was like. It's like I started school, and next thing you know,
Yeah.
I'm graduating. So it was quick. So yeah, I think, and so that made me think about that. And I was thinking to myself, like, hey, you know what? Part of what really helped me through the program and gain so much was that I already had life experiences, and I've already been exposed to a lot of these different things. So when I went through the MSW and the PSW program, it was more of just kind of defining those things that I already experienced into concepts for me to be able to pull that concept and utilize that inside of that area, right? So when you think about that for people that are much younger than we are going to school, you going to school in your 18, 19s or something, and there's no knock to you, but you haven't been on earth as long. So obviously your experiences aren't as vast as ours are because we've experienced much more, just by sheer fact we're much older, right? So you know, being that that's the case, and it kind of what I'm alluding to is that with time comes experience, and with time and experience bring wisdom and stuff to there. Trying to cram all of that into one individual in that short time frame, they're probably not going to get it. Not everything, and there may be some that people that are just that highly intelligent and able to really grasp everything. But no, I mean, if it was me and I did not have the experiences and I was 19 years old, 18, 19 going into college, I would have missed a whole lot. And I would really not be as great of a social worker, I think, because it is so intense that you can't retain all of those things and really understand these theoretical perspectives and concepts and stuff in that short period of time, with the intensity of not being able to focus on the next thing. And then another thing that kind of makes me think about too is, I do remember going through the course and I kept saying to myself, geez, like I have 5 classes, and at least 4 of them want a extremely long paper, and they all want it done at the same time. And I'm like, wait a minute, hold on now. So this month, my assignments are, I got to write this paper for you. I got to do this research paper for you. I think it was a research class. And then I had to do a paper for one other class. Just because I can't remember the class right now and to keep the conversation going. It was 4 papers, and we had to have them all do at the same time within the first month and a half of being in school. And it's like, okay, dude, so who am I going to focus on? Am I going to break this down to 25%? You get 25% focus. You get 25% focus. Is that how am I supposed to do it? Or am I supposed to say, well, you get, 12 and a half, you get 75, you don't get nothing. And then you get this, so when you really come back to think about it, when you think about the way that they structure the curriculums, how much are we really learning and retaining? And are you giving us the space to really digest what we just did? We're blowing through it so quick, we're not even digesting what we just supposedly learned.
Yeah, and going back to our we've talked about this in the past too, but the reading thing, you don't like to read, I like to read. But I think we're in agreement on this case. So setting this stage again, 5 3-hour classes per week, plus a part-time job, plus a practicum, which is 15, 20 hours a week that you got to go to, plus whatever else you have going on in your life, besides whether that's another job or kids or family stuff or whatever. And then you have those 5 classes, right, which in graduate school, I mean, every professor is different, but sometimes they expect you to read a lot. I've been in classes where they gave you a book a week. And if not a book a week, then it's like multiple, good-sized, nice-sized packets of articles or research projects or things like that. And so let's say one professor gave me a book to read that week, and 2 gave me 1 article, and 2 gave me 2 articles. Come on, man, how the hell am I supposed to read all that stuff? The fact of the matter is that I can't. And so you're assigning all of this stuff to us, but it's not feasible. It's not possible. I mean, it's literally not possible for you to read all that stuff. And that's just assuming it's a regular book and not like a textbook, with just a depository full of facts and information that you're supposed to somehow take in and digest. And so, sometimes we're just not honest with ourselves, in education or in social work, especially in social work education. It's like, so I get we have all these ideals that you want everyone to accomplish all of these things, but like it's literally not possible. And we ask people to do things, and then, we often, as social workers, we emphasize self-care both to the people we work with and to ourselves and our colleagues, our peers. But, I've been in several times where I had to go to like a class or a workshop or whatever on self-care. And I was like, I just need the self-care to not be required to do this. So I can go actually, even doing nothing could be could be considered self-care in some of those circumstances, right? So like, it's just unrealistic. And so why do you think that we can't see our own selves in the mirror as social work educators, if that makes sense? We're sticking with the traditional paradigm that you have to do this, and this, but not ever actually acknowledging that this, and this doesn't fit and it ain't going to work. So, why assign it if they're not going to read it? I guess is my point.
Well, I know, and even worse, I thought that was the whole purpose of having books in libraries. So if you need to go re-reference the information, you can go right there down and go get it. So I don't need to read all of it right now. I can come back later on and read it. That's why we got the book, so we can go back and re-reference the material. But yeah, you're right. And like I used to get anxiety about how because I really was so into, I was like excited to go to school. I had like so much of the utmost respect for all of my professors, you amongst them all. And like, I just wanted to like show y'all I can do good. I can learn, I can get this, because back in the days, I kind of messed my whole school path up for at least the traditional way. Right. So like, I'm like really into it, wanting to do good. I'm sitting there like, wait a minute, they want me to read all of this? And like, I can't get that done. So I actually got clever. And what I did was I started downloading the reading books, and then I would just listen to them because I like listening to music, watch TV and stuff like that. So I figured, hey, you know what? If I just let this thing play kind of in the background all day, or when I'm getting ready to go to sleep and throw my headphones on and kind of listen to it like that, maybe I might get through the reading, and surprisingly, it actually worked that way better. But again, that was for me because I don't read and retain that well. Versus we speak and I retain majority of all of it. So that kind of worked out for me. And had I not had that ability of the technology that we have nowadays, then yeah, no, I wouldn't have read anything. I would just came in there trying to wing it every day, which I still had to do sometimes.
Yeah, well, you're going back to artificial intelligence, AI, or Chat GPT. Can you summarize this book for me?
I know.
I mean,
and it's a good point. And if you think about it, most of everything that you kind of needed to grasp is summarized at the end of the chapter anyway, right? All the main points, all the things that they was trying to get you to kind of understand is all summarized. So, and I guess this is just to say this for people that are struggling with this now, but you got to get creative. Go read the summary and see the points they want to do and just go find those exact points in the book. That'll save you a lot of time. But I agree. Why do we do things that when we go through the experience, we experience it, we say, hey, this doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I went through it. This is what my experience was. And if I was in the position to change it, I would do X, Y, and Z. And then we become teachers or professors or people who are at the top making these curriculums and stuff. And then we change absolutely nothing. We do the same thing that we said that we didn't like before.
it's kind of like, how kids don't like when their daddy beats on them, but then they become the same thing when they're older. I think that sometimes we are what we know, right? And if that's what we know, even though we experienced it, we feel obligated to keep it the same. One of the things that I can't stand about our culture, as far as being a professor, is that pretty much every day, I have I have like 80 or 90 students this semester, give or take. And pretty much every day or pretty close to it, I get an email from somebody that talks about how sorry they are that this happened to them and that they're going to be late with an assignment or this or that. And I know professors have different perspectives on this, and because I went through this myself. But like, why the hell are you sorry for being sick? It's not something that you need to be sorry for, and it's not something that I should make you as a somebody with more power over you. Like making somebody feel bad because they're sick or because a relative dies, or whatever the case is, or because their life got overwhelming for them, why should you feel guilty or why should you feel sorry about it? And why should you feel that you need to apologize? Even when I tell, because I say it a lot in my classes, whether I make videos or tell them in person or write it down somewhere multiple times, I explain to them that I don't look at it that way. You don't need to I don't make students send me a doctor's note or anything like that. If you're going to tell me you're sick, I'm going to take your word for it. You're an adult in my class. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't need all that, and nor do I want to be their overlord or their overseer in such a way. But, what do you think that is? Because even me, because I'm reflecting on myself as a PhD student now, when I am unable to meet a certain requirement, which is, when you look at it, it's reasonable. I got 3 little kids at home. I'm a full-time professor, and I'm a PhD student, and I host a podcast, among other projects I got going on. It's pretty reasonable, right, that sometimes things might come up that makes it so that my life doesn't align with the requirement for a course. But, whenever I think about, writing the professor or whatever, I feel this tinge of, the guiltiness that I need to frame my message to them in some certain apologetic way. But why? It seems to me it seems like bullshit. And when I'm on the other side as the professor, again, it bothers me. Not that the student's writing me this, but that they feel that way, or that they think that they need to approach me in a certain way like that. To me, that's an imbalance of power, and it's an abuse of power to, for example, it reminds me of when you're in class as a youngster and you're like, can I use the bathroom? And they're like, no, you should have used it before class. Well, mofo, I didn't use it before class, and I got to go to the bathroom, so what do you want me to do? I mean, it's the reality of the situation, right? So, I don't know. You got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I'm thinking about it. I never actually thought about this before, so this is very interesting to kind of think about now. That dynamics of that power and balance. Because I, I'm thinking about why is that, right? Because I paid you. You didn't pay me for me to come to school. So I'm paying for this whole experience. Why I gotta be apologetic for not meeting something, or something happened inside of my life that may impede in there? And that's so true. And if I had to try to, I the only thing I can say is, why is that like that? Is because I guess that's the level of I can't pull it in. That's just it's just the level of what they put on these school assignments, and these requirements, that wade into whether or not you can graduate. That's just the impact that it has. And yeah, no, I probably need a few days to even kind of figure out why in the world do we do that. But that is true. If I was going to be late for an assignment, I wasn't able to make it on time. I mean, I'm 40 years old, but I mean, at the time, I'm like 36, 37, I'm 38. Dude, who am I apologizing to? What am I apologizing to you for? And again, like I said, this is my money. This is my experience. So it shouldn't be to the point where I bring on more anxiety because I'm not able to complete an assignment or something. And then even if you think about it, let's say if it's a midterm assignment. Well, let's say if I'm a week after that midterm assignment, does it really justify me losing a lot of grade points behind that? You still got it. We're still in school. I mean, we haven't finished school yet. So why are we making this? Why are we making all of these things so impactful, so weighted so heavily? Why is it weighted so heavily on these things? And I just shared with you, I'm not learning much from some of those things. So why are we weighting so heavily? That's a good question. And that is a terrible balance and structure, power and balance that structured in there.
Yeah, I was just talking to Alicia, my wife, who also graduated from Hawaii Pacific University. And she had this professor, I won't name him or anything like that, but she's talking about how he had he was really anal about everything, and strict guidelines for APA, and, his assignments were due at 11:59 and you weren't allowed to turn it in after. And, some professors do it differently with they dock points or whatever. But let's be real. 11:59 p.m. on a Friday night or a Thursday night or whatever is an arbitrary deadline that doesn't serve anybody unless that professor is going to get up and grade at 12:01 a.m. and he needs to do it right then and he only has the time to do it. Otherwise, it's an arbitrary deadline that probably doesn't align with most folks' lives. And so what is the difference if you turned in an assignment at 12:02 a.m. or even 5 6, 7, 8 a.m. the next morning. What is the difference? There's no difference. It's just something that we've made up, and it's using our power to. This is just my opinion. I know lots of professors out there that do things different ways. And some people could be saying, well, I'm teaching them responsibility or whatnot. But hey, in social work 341, human behavior in the social environment, I'm not here to teach you about how to be responsible and how to meet deadlines. I'm here to teach you how to analyze human behavior in the social environment. And so if you can show me that you can do that at 5 a.m. and somebody else can show me they could do it at 11:59 p.m., you both showed me the same thing. And so, I just think it's completely backwards as the way that we're supposed to think as social workers. We're supposed to be interconnected. We're supposed to humanize folks, meet them, meet the client where they're at, which in this case would be a student where they're at. To me, it just doesn't make any sense. But I think things are changing in that regard. Professors, times are changing. But to me, it's a lack of empathy, of all things,
And
for social work.
I agree with you. I agree with you.
Yeah. All right. Well, so you got your bachelor's degree, 4 years, went straight in, advanced standing, so 5 years total of education. You finish, and a lot of us don't know what to expect when we finish, with either of our degrees, but especially MSW, right? We have these ideas about being a therapist or about this or that. But many of us, as we're going through school, we don't realize how arduous it is, even beyond graduating, in order to get what you need, to get where you need to be to have a license. So what you have at LSW, you said, licensed social worker?
Yeah,
So,
so that came directly after I graduated.
and that's what I had too. I think it was, but I was in Utah for a brief year, and so I was called a CSW, but it's the same thing, I think. So when you get out, right, you got to go take an exam, which is it's a couple-hour exam. I can't remember exactly. But, they ask you all sorts of questions. Now, I studied really hard for that for a while, and I was taking online practice exams, and I was failing them, and I was like, what the heck am I doing wrong? And when I went to take the actual exam, so they have different versions of the exam, and they'll tell you the level of difficulty your version was. And I had the hardest version of the exam, and I passed by 18 questions. And so all that extra, and I sat there, and did the exam, went back and checked all my answers. I'm not a very good test taker, historically, and so I was trying to do the best that I could. But I guess the point is, for me, the exam wasn't that hard. The hardest thing about the exam was after graduating, I had to go buck up $400 to take it, if that makes sense. A lot of people don't have that kind of money at that point in their lives. But for some people, I know it's been really challenging, and they had to study really hard, and they had to take it. And so I'm not trying to put those people down. I think it's just a matter of the way we look at exams. And for some exams, I really struggle with memorizing things. But I think the social work exam, what I learned through taking those online practice ones and failing them, was that it wasn't that I wasn't memorizing enough content. It was that I wasn't approaching it the right way, and I wasn't looking at the questions, breaking down the questions logically. And I'd find out I was missing little points of the questions, it'd say what should you do first, and I wouldn't be seeing that, and or whatnot. Or there were questions I remember one that caught me off guard is I shouldn't say every social worker, but a lot of us social workers, we want to be kind of heroes, and we want to help people and whatnot, and do what's best for them. But one of the questions was so you have Bob the alcoholic who lives under the bridge, and he drinks every day, and he had alcohol poisoning, so they put him in detox, and his whole family's here, and they really love him, and they want you to help him get him clean, or they want him to stop drinking and all this stuff. But when you talk to Bill, he just says he wants to drink and live under the bridge. And the question was something like, what should you do? And everybody wants to help him and make him get treatment, but the answer is you got to meet him where he's at, right? And if Bill wants to be an alcoholic under the bridge, not saying you can't put services in his way or give him advice, but that's his choice. We're in no place to force somebody to do that. But anyways, I'd look at that exam, I missed that question on the practice exam because I wanted to solve the problem versus it's saying, what should I do according to social work values? And so what was your experience with taking the exam? Were you stressed out about it? Did it go well?
Yeah, I think the hardest part was of the exam wasn't necessarily the questions. It was all the anxiety leading up to it, all this preparation I felt like I did, feel like I'm underprepared, but I already scheduled it and now it's there, so I'm gonna go and do it. But trying to read as much as I can, trying to take all these different I downloaded some on my phone, different apps and doing the questions on the apps and all of this stuff and then get to the exam and then the exam is so structured, like literally I answered the last question with just enough time to answer the last question. So I mean the time that you had, if you broke down the period of time, I don't know if it was 1 or 2 hours, I honestly can't remember. But if you broke it down, it was literally like about 2 minutes, not even 2 minutes per question. It was about roughly a minute per question is what you got. So like you better figure this out in a minute or just answer and move on. And so, knowing that and I broke it down, I'm like, that was the worst part of it all, other than just answering the questions on the exam. And also too, what I again, I kind of try to find clever ways to kind of do stuff. So I was talking to people about the exam, what it was like when they took it. I spoke with my professors. You guys really actually did a really good job kind of coaching us through what we should do. You was recommending taking directly after you graduate because the questions that are on the test are literally basic level social work questions. So at the student level. So what you was mentioning, for example, we always kind of go into it and we want to fix it, but you're missing the beginning steps or the first parts. That was some of the things that you guys coached us on that helped me. And I took that and I was like, okay, got it. And so what I did was I started taking the practice exams, same way you did, downloaded some from like, I think the NSAW chapter of Hawaii. And then I took the questions and I got some wrong, got some right. When I looked at the details of why I got it wrong, it was in the fact that I wasn't paying attention to what the question was asking. And so when I kind of go back to it, it said, I don't know, just throwing a random one out there, but I think it's you got a high school kid or a kid comes into the office and then you see bruising on the kid, and whatever, raggedy clothes, stuff like that. And then what's the first thing that you should assess for? And then it'll say, assess to see if the child was sexually abused, see if the child was X, Y, and Z. And the answer was no, assess to make sure the child has the basic needs. You remember Maslow's hierarchy of needs? Is the basic needs met? Does it have food, water, shelter? You know what I'm saying? And are they safe right now? That's the main thing. And then you're trying to figure this out because they throw these clues and it goes back to the basics. So that understanding that and being able to expose that and really going into the test, focusing on that, that's the reason why I passed the exam. And I had the hard just like you did. I didn't pass with as many as you did, so great job on you. I did pass with definitely way more than I needed to pass the exam. And the way I passed it was because I did focus exactly on what was presented to me. Pay attention to what the question is asking and think of it from a basic level. What's the first step you take? The first step isn't to do assessment. The first step is to establish rapport or whatever that looks like, and so you got to look at it at basic level. That's the reason why I was successful. It wasn't all the things that I remembered, it wasn't all this extra stuff. That's the reason why I was successful in that one. And so that's what that experience was like. So after I took it and I finished it, I was happy, I was relieved, but I realized, all that pressure that was built up going into it wasn't even really necessary. And additionally, it's actually counterintuitive to people being successful because that's the reason why other people are failing. It is because they aren't intelligent enough or they aren't good social workers. They don't know the information. It's all of that pressure. I mean, you got to be a very strong individual to handle all of that and then go and perform under the microscope of that time period that you got to do it in.
Yeah, and going back to, I already laid out how much is required of you in, say, an advanced standing graduate program, and even before that, you had to go through 4 years of undergraduate. So it's another one of those things that doesn't quite make sense to me. So I went through all of this stuff, passed all the exams, and wrote all the papers you gave me, but now I need to take another test. That wasn't good enough, and I have to pay another several $100s to go take it. And all the, like you said, all the pressure that goes along with it. But my advice would be to students that, are going to graduate and going to go take any of these exams, because there's several. There's the BSW one, there's the MSW, there's the clinical one later on. But I would suggest doing that as quickly as possible. I know some folks like to get out and study and stuff, but in my opinion, you just went through several years, or at least say if you were in advanced study, you went through 1 year of highly intensive coursework and experience. You should go take it pretty quick so that all that stuff is still fresh in your mind. Because like G was saying, I don't think that everybody is different and everybody has different needs. So I'm not saying don't do exactly that we have the exact blueprint. But I don't think that the answer is memorizing everything, because you're never going to be able to memorize everything. I mean, they could throw you questions from all sorts of the DSM diagnoses, all sorts of stuff. And so, yeah, you should know what you know, and you should have obviously picked up a lot of information during your studies. But to me, the best way that you can ensure that you pass that exam is to do a little bit of practice, like as far as not necessarily so you're memorizing more, although that's helpful if you do memorize what you're studying, but so that you understand how the questions are asked, and you can see like maybe the fallacies that are happening when you're missing the answers, on the practice test. And then, like G was saying, very good advice that you gave. You're in there, you're taking the exam, make sure you're looking at the way the question is structured and exactly what it's asking you. So like read the question, look at the answer so you're familiarizing yourself with the options. Go back and read the question again and make sure you're noticing what it says, because sometimes they'll throw in what should you do first. And you could think about, like, instead of what's the most important thing to do, well, what do you need to do first? Not what's the most important, but what's first. And that's easy to miss, as your mind's all over the place and you're going through all these questions. So that's my advice, is rather than spending your energy or utilizing your energy to memorize more stuff, utilize it to understand the format and become a better test taker in this context. So moving forward, so you got your LSW, you've got your master's degree. What's the next step up? You know what I mean? What are you trying to achieve? A licensed clinical social worker, which means basically that you can be a therapist, kind of on the equivalent of a clinical psychologist. Not the same, but it's pretty much the equivalent in most ways. And so, first of all, why did you want to do that? Did you always know that you wanted to go that far, or is this something that you decided after you graduated?
I honestly knew going into the program that that's my end goal. Because again, like I said, at that time of my life when I was transitioning out of the Marine Corps and then trying to figure out what I was going to do with the rest of my life, and still dealing with other things that kind of happened while I was in the Marine Corps and stuff, I was, like I said, I started seeking therapy and stuff like that, and therapy and stuff, and I just saw there was a big disconnect between understanding the culture of veterans and military service members, active duty, reserves, whatever that looks like, and then what they was bringing to the table to try to help us. And many of our people kind of even still felt the same, So and some of it is military culture that kind of, not really shames, but kind of doesn't look favorable towards seeking mental health services. And just so that makes sense to you, it's more of like a warrior's culture. You don't want to appear to be weak, or you don't want to seem to be unfit. And if you are even found to be unfit, then you can't even continue your service because you're unfit for duty. So there's a lot that kind of goes into it. But still, my experience, it just like, I don't think you guys get it. I don't think you guys get me. And many people are saying the same thing. So that's kind of going into it. I knew that I ended up wanting to be able to come back and help veterans. But that was because my time and everything was surrounded around me getting out the Marine Corps and stuff and not being able to get the help that I wanted. But I knew I wanted to go into individual counseling. But that's expanded past the veteran part, in other words. So. But yeah, I knew going into it that that's what my goal is, and so that's why I've always been focused. As soon as I graduate, I took the LSW, which I do also agree with you, and just my opinion to anybody listening: take it right after school. I don't even think you need to study that much, because I took the test and everything I studied I ain't need it for the test. It is seriously understanding how to answer the question that they're asking you, and then go off into work and you start getting your clinical experience, and then trying to get licensed for LCSW. And so, yeah, I'm almost through this journey, roughly about I'm halfway there. But the requirements, I kind of been shifting back and forth about what's required to go through the LCSW at this point. And I think some of it is definitely beneficial, and some of it not really sure. But I kind of changed my theory on it. So you have to get a lot. Every state is different, as we all know. But I need 2,000 clinical hours. I need 100 supervision hours, which I was like felt
So
like in the beginning. I'm sorry.
we're saying 2,000 clinical hours. You said 1,000 supervision hours,
No, no, 100 supervision hours.
100 supervision hours.
Yes.
Okay.
So going through, so that seems achievable. But I was kind of looking at like, gosh, that's a long time. You got to wait 2 years post graduation, all these different things. But I kind of changed my focus into saying, no, actually, if you're going to be doing individual counseling independently with nobody giving you that guidance, there is a period of time that you need to kind of, I guess, mature in the field,
Mm.
so that way you can get more exposure and understanding. Because coming out, I felt like I was ready to go, and I am ready to go for a lot of people, but not for everybody. And you don't know who what is coming to. So that was a little bit of the just the ambition of me, like I'm ready to get out there. I can do this now. But as I sat down and waiting to get my license, I realized no, this sit wait period is actually good because it gives you time to really fully develop yourself. So when you are really helping people independently, you can you have the skills that are needed to do so.
Hmm. Yeah. So let's break it down a little bit again. So you gotta, in order to get to an LCSW, and again, like G said, it's a little bit different from state to state, but generally it's similar. So you got to get your bachelor's in social work, or if you don't have a bachelor's in social work, then you have to do 2-year MSW program. If you have your bachelor's in social work, then you can do, if you meet all the requirements, then you can do a 1-year advanced standing a master's program, which is very strenuous and intensive, but you definitely, here's 2 examples right here. You definitely can do it. And then after you graduate, you got to get, if you want to practice in any way, you got to get some kind of license from different states. Different states are different. In some places it's a CSW, certified social worker. Some places it's a LSW, licensed social worker. And then if you want to be a therapist, basically you have to acquire an LCSW. Now you can mostly perform most of the duties as an LCSW while you're in the works to acquire your own license by having a supervisor on the job. You know what I mean? As long as you have a supervisor signing off on things, then you can partake in most things. That's why you'll see here in Alaska, you'll have a lot of companies that will offer bonuses and whatnot to bring folks up here to be clinical social workers that just graduated, and then they'll provide their supervision at the job so they can work on the job. They just can't do it on their own, again, without basically an overseer or supervision. So then you said you got to do how many hours?
So it's actually I take it back. It's 3,000 total hours. 2,000 hours can be earned through direct supervision, and then the other 1,000 hours is up under the 100-hour supervision that you are doing face to face, however whatever modality it looks like with your supervisor.
Right on. And then you got
So
to go take another exam, right? The clinical
yeah, then you
exam.
gotta you gotta take another exam, and to my understanding, the exam really isn't okay. I'm not taking it back. It's not that it's different from the LSW exam. It's just they just ask you more questions. But the questions that could have came from the LSW can be on the LCSW exam. But they just have a different weighted level of focus in which area. 'Cause I think it's what 5 categories. I have to pull my book out, but just off the top of my head, there's different categories of topics that they look at, whether it's like assessments, diagnoses, I don't know, it could be wherever it's at. So and they pull a percentage from there. So it's just the percentages change of where they're pulling the information from. So you can still, like I said, get the same stuff that you could have gotten on the LSW test, on the LCSW test. Um,
Yeah. Okay. So, and then supervision. So,
Rose.
I just want to break it down a little bit. So, supervision. So, if you're in some place like Alaska, everything again, and Alaska's big. There's a lot of different places, a lot of different agencies. So, there's going to be different ways that people do things. But generally in Alaska, there's a very high need, and so what they will do is, like I was saying just a moment ago, they'll hire somebody without an LCSW and help them get their license by providing supervision hours, oftentimes paying for the licensing fees or exam fees. So they help you to do it. Whereas to kind of juxtapose that with Honolulu, there's still a high need in Honolulu, but there's a lot more competition. There's plenty of social workers in Honolulu. They're typically not going to provide you, not all, again, everywhere is different, but they're oftentimes not going to provide you with the supervision, which means you would need to seek it out on your own. Now, I'm not a clinical social worker, but my wife is, and she was in Honolulu at that time, and the way that she did group supervision with a former professor from HPU that no longer worked there, I don't think. And so they would meet once a week or once every 2 weeks or something like that. Now, there's two angles I want to take with this, is just to kind of lay it out like how your supervision looks. But actually receives supervision one-to-one. I know you guys have talked about group supervision, but one-to-one from my wife, Alicia, and maybe she can chime in if she's listening at some point. But what does that look like for you, the supervision with Alicia?
The supervision with Alicia actually looks like I feel like it should look. You know what? It looks like what I would have expected supervision to look like versus what is out there for me. So kind of what Christian is mentioning, and it's 100% true, right? It's different here trying to get supervision, and it's not really offered in many places. And if you do find it outside of your work, it's very costly. They charge it almost like they're seeing a client. Like they're billing a client like $100 an hour, like not even billing, your clients that much. It's pretty strange and why it's so difficult. But the experience, and then they'll meet once, and then it takes forever for you to get your license and stuff that way, and you kind of making somebody else's pockets pretty nice. But the way Alicia's doing it is I like the way, and that's kind of where I first saw it should kind of be, because it doesn't necessarily. So the way that she's doing it, she is creative with it, and she's fostering learning from different areas, and then we can still convene and discuss it. But me doing work outside of our face to face is helping with my hours, and so I appreciate how we're doing that. Which makes it which helps out, because if she gives me case studies, for example, and then I go through the case studies and I get to formulate my own diagnosis, my own treatment plan, come up with the different methods of assessments and everything, and then we go through and we discuss that. And I like the way that she's doing that, because once we're at LCSW, obviously we're going to have that ability to be able to diagnose. So if I'm not getting chances and opportunities to expand and being able to diagnose, then what good am I? So that's another portion or another part of the way that she's running our supervision that makes it that I appreciate, and that really works well for me. I think that the way she's doing it would be the way that I would do it too. And then because I don't want to get anything necessarily free, and it takes from her time. She's completely reasonable. And I'm not putting any prices out there because I don't want people like, oh, you charge this, I ain't getting into all that. But I'm just saying it's very reasonable and it makes sense. Because again, as social workers, we are trying to help people to improve their situations. So how are we helping people to improve if they working hard, they're doing the supervision, and all the money they work for is going into your pocket because they paying an arm and leg to do it. Now they got to pick up another job just so they can still maintain the bills while they get it's complete goat rope. So outside of the way that Alicia is doing it, which I love the way she's doing it, I wish other people will follow her method of doing it. It's completely different on the other side.
Yeah. Well, on the other side, I wanted to explore here real quick would be, and then I'll take some of these questions. So if you have a question, feel free to type it in the chat, or feel free to call in, queue up the call in if you'd like. But the other side I wanted to explore with this is the way that relationships change, power imbalances change. So like I said, I was G's professor back in like 2019, 2020 through the pandemic. And we were friendly with each other, obviously. And we're similar age. So it's not like there was the imbalance in, like I was like 35 or 36 at the time with a 20-year-old or something like that. We're similar ages. But there's still a power imbalance, which is why obviously it's not quite appropriate to be best friends while you're in a student-professor relationship. But that doesn't mean we couldn't be friendly. And then I moved on with my life, and he continued proceeding with his education and whatnot. And life moves quickly, and when you get to these points, it seems like some things seem like they take forever, but it really moves quickly. And so, blink of an eye, G's no longer, my student, but he's on equal footing with me as my colleague, and we've become friends since then. And to add to that, he met my wife Alicia through me, and now at this point, she's contributing to his to further his career aspirations by helping him with or by providing supervision. And so it just shows the many ways that our roles, that our connections and the balances of power can change. But I think, I try to maintain more equal balance in the classroom, whereas we were talking about some professors are like, it's out of whack. So there's already some balance there, but there's still an imbalance, right? I still have the power to give a grade or to do things different ways. And so I just wanted to say that, I just wanted to kind of paint a picture of what that might look like and how, you go from students to being colleagues and friends and whatnot. And I also wanted to say that I appreciate it. You know what I mean? Like, education can be a lonely world in some ways. It can help us forge a lot of connections, but in working in education, I'm busy all the time and with my family and everything. And so relationships that are organic like that are built up through a relationship that was different at one time. Like I said, a student-teacher relationship where there's a little bit of differences in power. To being able to see your students grow and contribute, and then they end up graduating and going to the field, but then you contribute to my life in other ways. When I was teaching at University of Hawaii, G came over and facilitated a talking circle in my class. I had another old student come recently and speak in one of my classes recently. And then my wife contributes to G through his supervision, and then G's contributing to my podcast by coming in here. This is his second time on the podcast. So I just want to kind of lay that out and show how, relationships change and they grow and they evolve, just like we change and we evolve and we grow. I just wanted to say I really appreciate that relationship, G, and it's been a pleasure to get to know you as my student, but even more so to see you grow beyond that and the way that our lives are intertwined in different ways. And, even just a real quick short story is that when I was on my vacation through the West Coast, we were driving back through Vegas, and G just happened to be there, and we stayed at the same hotel, and we both got the opportunity to step away from our families, and we went and played. Won't go into too many details, but we hit the tables and gambled for a little bit and got to step out. And so, when as a student, I'd like you to look at your relationships that way. I'm not saying you're going to be best friends with all of your professors. In fact, 9 out of every 10 professors I had, I don't have any contact with them. I'm not saying I don't regard them highly or anything like that, but most of them I don't. But you should look at, who do you resonate with as teachers, as professors, and even peers. But even though you can't have relationships now, you might in the future, and you may end up working together even for that matter. And so think about it like that, and think about how you can evolve the relationships and stay in contact, because you're going to need people, whether it's for a letter of recommendation, you need a piece of advice, you need supervision. There's a million different things that you might need. You might just need a friend. And so think about those things as you move forward, because your relationships can evolve just like you can. And so, once again, G, it's been a pleasure to see you grow, and it's a blessing to have you as a friend and a colleague these days. And I'm sure that those things will continue to intertwine as we move forward. So I appreciate that.
I completely appreciate it, and I want to say thank you. But I thank you and your family, the entire family, even more. I feel like I'm a part of your family. And it's always felt like that. And you're right. I mean, I've never honestly, even being a student of yours, to moving on and us becoming friends and things like that, I never felt like we've ever had to, or we ever been challenged in that imbalance. And like you said, it's been times we've talked in class, and we didn't necessarily agree, with exactly each person's definitive point of view or what a perspective was, but we at least understood where each other was coming from. and that was mutually understood. But yeah, and then I mean, after class, we could still just walk and talk. Remember we had a few other guys that kind of hang out. But I mean, after class, then you became who you are. Regular person. Here in the class is this way, outside of this way. We never had to really have those difficulties of, I guess, the fraternization and stuff like that. And maybe it might be our maturity level, or maybe just be the way that you approach it, and maybe the way that many others professors can maybe think about approaching it. Because I mean, once the class is done, I mean, you are still Mr. or Mrs. whoever you are, which is just a regular human being inside this world. There's no different from the next person you're looking at. The only thing that's really different between you is whatever experience you had before and whatever age you are. So, I mean, other than that, I mean, I really don't, and maybe that could kind of talk into and something to look at in the future of answering that question that we had earlier. Why is it that we're apologizing and feeling, down or shame or guilt or something like that when we weren't able to complete something because there was something in our lives that got in the way. Maybe looking at that piece and that power and balance there, how we carry ourselves, maybe as a professor, in our engagements with our people and, in the classroom and outside the classroom, maybe that might need to be reassessed. And if that could open up more doors, because I feel like I learned much more from my professors that were like you. We had another one, Mr. Tran, that was there. Some of our other professors, actually, I can't even really, I'll be honest, all of our professors in our cohort, did not, it didn't feel like, it was always professor student. It felt like it was professor student in the classroom because we came here for a mission. And then when these doors opened up and walk outside this classroom, we are whoever your first name is, and I think that opened up an environment for learning for my cohort, at least, to be able to learn and not be afraid to, I guess, seek help, mention the things that they don't know, ask to get more assistance in different areas, or share to be able to help experience others. So I appreciate you. I appreciate your family. I appreciate the opportunities I've had. And I hope that we continue these on because it's been a good experience.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Well, we have some comments and some questions, and I'm going to go through these a little bit out of order because we were talking about, writing and whatnot, and Anna had contributed earlier. She said, I think keeps spazzing out, but she mentioned that she uses Speechify that helps her to write, and I asked her what it was, and Anna said, Speechify is an online program where you can upload PDF or Word documents, and it will read it to you. If you work through Google Chrome, it can read anything on the screen. If it has a hard time recognizing what is on the screen, you can use it to take a screenshot, and it'll read that. There's an app, but it doesn't work as well. I use the app if I already uploaded documents onto the site. It does cost some money, but it isn't too bad. You can pay monthly or yearly. So yeah, students, if you're looking for some help in that regard, Speechify, check that out. And then I have a couple questions. I don't know why this keeps doing this. Hold on. It basically doesn't allow me to look. There we go. She says, how? Really won't let me see. I did this last week. Just a second. Can you read that chat, G? Can you go up to where Olivia was writing? It just keeps
Olivia,
spazzing out.
yeah. So are there any trainings, workshop, therapy programs you are looking forward to taking um, after getting your LCSW? Um, Actually, yes, there is one that I'm looking at right now, EMDR, which is kind of like an eye movement therapy utilized for traumatic, for people that are struggling with traumatic experience and stuff. So that is one that I'm actually looking forward to going into, kind of staying in line with my direction of being able to go back and provide services for my veterans. So I want to come with some tools that will be able to help with those traumatic experiences and stuff that many of us have faced.
Yeah, and I think she asked another question, which, again, it keeps passing out, so I can't actually read it, but I think she's asking about when you become a therapist and you have friends that try to seek you out for advice or whatnot or counseling, like how do you draw the line? And I don't know, maybe you have an answer for that, G?
Yes, I do actually. I tell all my friends, listen, I'm not a social worker 24 hours a day. I can't be focused on trying to resolve something 24 hours a day. So me as a friend for you, like I tell all my friends, I would never, I will give you advice from friend to friend in the moment. I will not pull or utilize any type of social work thing, and I don't feel like that's appropriate. In my opinion, everybody can feel the way they want to feel, but in my opinion, I don't feel like it's appropriate for you um, to do that because you're invested. You know what I mean? The reason why we go seek professional counseling is because that person isn't necessarily invested in the fog of what's going on, and I think that starts to blur the line. So I will give them my, true friendship, true. Uh, I guess my true recommendation. So I'll tell you how I would approach the situation, which would still kind of be grounded off of some sense, right? Because I mean, it's not like I'm gonna do some knucklehead stuff just because I'm not performing as a social worker today. No, I'm always gonna be, kind of on the straight and narrow. But I would not do any type of therapy and stuff like that because I just feel like that just really blurs the line between y'all friendship.
Yeah, and honestly, I haven't actually had friends that have asked me specifically for themselves, but I've had a lot of folks, family, friends, say, "Hey, can you talk to my kid?" Or, "Hey, can you give me, can you do this or do that?" And I'm happy to use my skills to help out family and friends. The problem is that I think many folks look at or think about it as in that I could fix their problem somehow, or I could fix the issue. But most problems are, deeply embedded and have multiple layers, and they take time. Even when I look at my own life, you know what I'm saying? Like there was nothing that just like changed because somebody told me something or somebody introduced me to something. It all took time, and it was stuff that had to unfold. And so I think that's where the misconception comes sometimes, where people are looking to you to help them, but what they really want is you to fix the problem that's not fixable in such a way. You know what I mean? Even if I did sign up as their therapist or their counselor or whatever, none of us have a magic wand. Or there's no easy answer to those things. It takes time. And so while I've always been willing to help, I just always have to kind of reiterate that it's not that simple. It's a much more complicated process. As
And,
far as
and
like,
can I?
oh, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna throw one thing on the sorry on the internet too, and then just for I'm pretty sure a lot of people think this, and maybe not necessarily express it, but again, like it becomes sometimes it also becomes a little bit invasive, just because that person know you and they figure that you'll do that for them. But understand, like, listen, we go to work and we go to work to get paid, and that's what we're doing. It's not like we don't like helping people, but we also got our own time that it need to be respected too. And sometimes it gets like that. I've had people that ask the same thing. Hey, you know what? My son's doing this. You know what? I told him that you're gonna call him and talk to him. Wait a minute. I never said I even had the time to talk to him. You're just assuming that that's the case. So, I throw it out there because many people probably don't want to say it because it's pretty abrasive to say. So I say it for you. And we all don't want to just fix your family. So talk with you. That's not what we want to do all the time. We go to work, we do that, and when we get home, we kind of ready to be ourselves.
Yeah, all right. Well, we did have Alicia chime in, and she said that both of you work in systems with a whole lot of bureaucracy. Yes, we do. What's your advice to live these philosophies within those systems and still thrive? Well, I'll take this one first, and I'll let G have a crack at it. But I think that I have to be myself, which doesn't always, or I should say that it often doesn't align with bureaucratic methods, bureaucratic policies, the way other people in bureaucracies think and act. And so I try to do my best to always be myself and don't let bureaucratic measures or bureaucratic policies or bureaucratic ways of doing things, I don't let that hinder me in ways that I can avoid it. So a professor's a really good job for me because it's not like I have an overseer that's looking at everything that I do or managing my time. Or I do have a boss, and I have colleagues that are, a couple of them are, I would consider my mentors. And so try to find a balance in it all. As anyone that'll tell you that has my classes, I do things way differently than other people. I conduct things way differently. I'm not your typical professor. I got long hair, tattoos. I'm just different. So I think one of the key things is I choose my battles. You know what I mean? Like, there's all kinds of things that piss me off or that make me upset about things, and I'm like, why is it this way? But I've realized that I need to put my energy into more positive things. So rather than fighting that battle, I put that effort into the way I do things with my students, or, improve the things that I'm doing, or put the energy into the podcast or something like that. But it can be hard, because there's all sorts of rules and whatnot that I completely disagree with, that I've got to abide by, and I've got to be respectful. One of the things, another part of that is I try not to project when I'm upset about a policy or something onto the person who's enforcing it or whatever, because they're just a human being and an individual. And I've made that mistake in the past, where somebody's trying to enforce something and I can't see the logic in it and I disagree with it. And so whatever it is, I'll write a letter or whatever. And sometimes that's okay, but sometimes I've realized that I need to focus my energy on the things that I can make a difference and that I can change. And that's, my attitude, the way that I conduct myself. I'm not going to, what I consider myself, a revolutionary social work professor. No matter how revolutionary I view myself, I'm not going to walk in there and change every policy just because I think it doesn't logically make sense. You know what I'm saying? And a lot of those things are deeply embedded for years and through different systems and whatever. And so I try to make a change where I can, but the biggest change I try to enact is by, not sacrificing my character, my authenticity of who I am and the way that I do things for the bureaucracy, but at the same time, not picking a fight everywhere so that I'm constantly fighting battles that I'm not going to win anyways, just to prove points, because I can be a hard-headed individual at times as well. What are your thoughts, G?
My thoughts are pretty consistent with yours. First thought is, you maintain your own self integrity. Yeah. So if if you face with those challenges, different things inside your jobs, I mean, you don't want that also too. Like you said, you don't want to keep riding on that negativity. And I think that there's always times where we got to kind of take a self assessment and really understand that this is something that we want to continue to deal with or not. So when those things are kind of brought up, or these different barriers that are placed there through the bureaucracy or policies and all these different things that are established, if it doesn't align with you and that's something that you can't, I guess, endure without it impacting you when you leave the workplace, then you might want to look for a different place to work. And that's just for the longevity of the job. And we all know about burnout and different things. I mean, that's how those things come to play. But when it comes to that, like I do see a lot of bureaucracy that impacts a lot of our people in so many vastly different ways. And the way that I kind of go about it and approach is I try to look for a way around that barrier. I don't necessarily try to fight and challenge those things because it's nothing I can change at my level. I mean, these are macro level issues and policies that have been structurally established. And that's what it looks like. So, arguing and fighting with that, it's not going to change and you're not really necessarily achieving anything. So I believe that the approach is to find out what works or find out what at least alleviate the situation enough that you can function, right? So if it's, can't do exactly this, but can you do that? I see a lot of things that impact our people. One of the most challenging things that really, really impact me is I see so many of our kapuna, which is our elderly, kapuna is the word in Hawaii, what we call our elderly here. But many of them have worked their entire lives and everything. They're living on a fixed income. Their spouse has passed away, so it's just them trying to maintain. They've done what society has told them to do, work your entire life until you reach retirement age and you'll get your social security benefits and all this other stuff. But they're challenged with dialysis, so that's costing them a little bit of money. They literally living from paycheck to paycheck because of their health conditions, and the money that's being provided to them really isn't a whole lot in the cost of living here in Hawaii. So then you turn around and you try to apply for these people for different assistances and stuff, and then they get denied, for that. And it's like, wait a minute. So they've been paying into these systems that give it to people that aren't actually necessarily always working. Whatever your circumstances is, I'm not judging that. But I mean, just to see, like, I have some that sit there and like, this lady doesn't even work. And then she gets SNAP and all these other different things. I worked my entire life, and then I can't get these things because I just barely make it over the threshold. But because of my health condition, I can't make it. And so those are some of the bureaucratic things that are there in place that I just can't break down. I can't force them to give you some more extra money. So we have to look for other constructive ways to make these things work. Whether it's, and to be quite honest, it's, not to really, expose other people for what they have to do, but we come up with different things, to make it work. And instead of having to stand there at that barrier and not progress forward, we find an avenue around it then. And that's what I feel like the approach that I take, and that's the reason why I can deal with some of those challenges that I can't necessarily stop, because my focus is, okay, that's fine. How do we get around it? And that's the way I approach it. So I'm kind of similar to you. I don't fight it. I don't let it rest on me. I just say, you know what, we'll figure something else out.
Yeah, and I like how you said, like, find a way to work around it. Be creative. Find a creative solution to the problem. You know what I mean? Find creative ways to do things. Find a new way. Find a way to work around, work through it, something like that. All right, well, we're over our, I shouldn't say our allotted time, because in reality, this is just a dialogic podcast that could go on as long as it needs to. But we got lives and all of that. And so we are over the 2-hour mark. And there's one thing that we didn't cover that I just want to talk about real quick is we're both men in social work. And there's plenty of men in social work, but the ratio is kind of the opposite as it is in many professions. It's a female-dominated field. I think if we're not going to, I don't want to actually perform the exercise, but if you were to just go to people or were to imagine what does a social worker look like, it probably doesn't look like me and G. And so there's a lot of misconceptions, I think, or a lot of misperceptions about men in social work. And I like to tie it to misperceptions with like parenthood and fatherhood too. One of the things that irritates the hell out of me being a father is like going out with my kids, and one of the main comments I get, "Oh, babysitting for the day, huh?" And I'm like, "Yeah, every day, every day, man." Or like, going to, like, there's so many examples, but like I could go to the doctor with Alicia there and the kids, and like for something like that, they literally, like, whoever's working, like, looks through me like I'm invisible and just addresses Alicia, my wife, like the female's always supposed to be in charge in some of these things. And that also makes me empathize with females, because in many cases that's completely the opposite. But regarding, fatherhood, like, there's all these misconceptions about what fathers can or what they should do maybe or whatnot. And I don't fit into that box that people have created. And then you go to men in social work, and I think a lot of people are like, why would you choose social work? I think it's looked at as a female profession from a lot, not from everyone, but from a lot of people. But from my opinion, my perspective, men are extremely valuable in social work. And as a matter of fact, just to bring it here to the state of Alaska, I think that the state of social work in Alaska, or behavioral health, or whatever we want to call it, would be vastly improved if we had local Native men, more of them, as social workers and in related fields. And I get there's many reasons why there's a disconnect there. Men in Alaska are oftentimes, especially Native Indigenous men, are, they're partaking in providing for their family in other ways, such as subsistence and more physically demanding roles. But what do you think it is about men? And I think one thing that you do see is you do have a lot of men that end up being like the supervisor or the director or whatever in places. I still think that power structure is in place, but there's just a thing about men in social work that people just don't seem to get. And, I was wondering if you had any insights into that, G. What do you think about men in social work? How have you been misidentified, or what do you think about that?
Yeah, it's, I think it's just a lot of the historical, societal impressions, roles that have been placed out there of, like, kind of what you mentioned, the woman is supposed to do this, the man is supposed to do that. So if I'm taking my children outside or taking them for the day, I'm just babysitting. I'm not being a father that wants to be with my kids and spend time. I'm babysitting because I really don't want to be with my kids. So, it's just all of these these historical societal impressions that we have placed upon the way that we should perceive the way that things are supposed to be. I guess that's what also impacts that too. And it's funny because even while you were speaking, I kind of thought about this. So I dress nice when I go to work because I want to be presentable for my people. It's truly what it is. And a lot of times they say, "Oh, I thought you were a doctor. I didn't know all this time you were a social worker." I'm like, yeah, I've been your social worker for the past 2 years. Every time I talk to you, I say, if you need me, ask for your social worker, but you still think I'm the doctor. So it's hard for people to so even at that time, I can tell people I'm a social worker. And when I meet with them 6 months down or whatever down the line, they're like, "Oh, you're my social worker?" I'm like, "You didn't know that?" Like, I've been telling this, like, so it's crazy. And I even was just thinking, like, even when I go, and I've had certain situations where there has been a female social worker that has was trying to advocate for somebody for X reason, and then some reason when I advocated for this person, it goes through, and it shouldn't be that way, but I'm just looking, but even noticing that, it's like, why is this such a different thing when it's a male sitting there? People look at it differently. They're not sure if they should fit in there, or it just doesn't fit the when like you said, the exercise you tried in the beginning. If you close your eyes, what do you imagine a social worker to be, right? Or if you kind of think back in the day, what was your mom's responsibility to do? She was to do this, you were supposed to do that. So it's just the fact that we have rested in these historical roles for so long. It's still difficult, even though people have worked towards it, they can see past it. It's still difficult for it not to resonate in their head that something just seems out of place there. And I do get that a lot. Like, many people keep not believing I'm a social worker, and I'm like, almost like try to convince them, yes, I really am a social worker. Yeah, it's weird. It's a weird experience.
Yeah, and we don't have time to talk about it too, but there's also just the stigma of that word social worker, right? And what that is and how people view it.
True.
Some people are going to view social worker as like CPS, a CPS worker, because that's what they've had experience with, or that's the tales that they've heard. So it's really deep, but we got to change that as men in social work. I think, I don't mean like take power as in go and be the supervisor at every facility and be the leader in that way. I just mean men have a lot of potential to help in different ways than some females are able to help, and that's just the fact of the matter. And I don't even mean just male to male. Like, I've worked with females as well, where I've able to provide a different, just something different. Let's just put it that way, provide something different. And so it's been important. I've had females that have told me, wow, I'm surprised that I'm really comfortable. I've had students and like clients tell me this, that I'm surprised because I'm usually not good at or willing to talk or deal with men in this way, but they liked my demeanor or whatever, the way that I conducted myself. And so it's important for us to do that and be to role model in that way, but also just, to provide a different masculine option out there, which, provides more balance, right? We've been talking about. And Olivia had a comment contributing to this. She said, "My sister always says it's rude when people look at her husband when he is with their daughters and say, quote, and he's so good with the girls, end quote. Of course he is. I think society has noticed that in the past, one of the only times when a woman has rights was when in a divorce, that the woman usually got the children. It's given an illusion that mothers are the preferred parent." And obviously mothers can care for children in ways that sometimes men can't. I agree with that. And it's just something that we need to get over. Like, we have these preconceptions about what things are or what they should be. And it's not that clean, especially in today's world. Even if you were taking the female, the female was expected to stay home and raise the children. But hell, with this economy, you got to go to work. So it's just not the same. There's a different balance than there was in the past. But all right, we're way over time. We're going over we're going to have a 2.5 hour podcast, which is great. I say it all the time. It's a good conversation, good dialogue when the time passes and you're not like, wow, it's been forever. So it's been a pleasure talking with you again, G. I'm sure it's not the first, and I'm sure it won't be the last. So thank you again for generously donating us your time, your wisdom, your knowledge, and your empathy. And I look forward to the next time. With much respect from me to you, I hope that that you're doing well, and that I hope that I can visit you in Hawaii sometime soon. It looks beautiful there. But I did want to make one comment real quick I meant to make earlier, is that talk about bureaucracies and things like that, and whatever government and things. And who the hell's idea was it in Hawaii or in Oahu or Honolulu to put up just random high rises like the ones behind you? You think that they could have did it with a little more strategy, so that there's just not like a random building blocking everyone's view here and there, and because it's not. There's no coordination to it. It's just like you have some high rise here, a high rise over there. So it's like they had no, they didn't look forward into the future at all regarding those things. So I think that's interesting. But I hope that I can be there. I definitely miss the spirit of Hawaii, and I miss my friends and family, my ohana over there. So much respect to you and your family. Nothing but love from my family to yours. Thanks for coming on the podcast, G. You got any last words?
Same here, brother. But I appreciate it all. Hope to see you and the entire family again. Much love to you all. Thank you to everybody that listened. And let's just keep living life and enjoying the people and the experiences that we have with each other.
Yeah. And thanks to everybody that participated, that's listening in. I know we got questions from Alicia, Olivia, and Anna. At least thank you for your contribution. It's invaluable. Well, that brings us to the end of episode number 25. I usually have a podcast every week. Before, we would record every Saturday live, like today is recorded Saturday live, but that's not the case anymore. We record at various times on the Riverside platform. We're no longer on call-in. So the best way that you can stay updated with the podcast, if you want to know when we go live, follow us on Instagram at A Conscious Party, or look up UAF Social Work on Facebook. I always post it on there if you want to be a part of the live broadcast. Otherwise, you can find us after we record. You can find us on Apple, on Spotify, on Google Podcasts. You can find us on YouTube. So you could look up, or you can find us on Podbean. We have a look for the Critical Social Worker on Podbean. That has links to everything. So if you want to watch the video or listen, there's all sorts of options. Like I said earlier in the show, if you love the podcast, if you like us at all and want to support us, then follow us on those platforms, like us, send us, put reviews. Those are the things that will help elevate the podcast forward. But so my next podcast is actually this Wednesday at 8 a.m. Alaska time. It's going to be with Dr. Four Arrows. I'm really looking forward to this. He wrote a book that I read recently called, I can't remember what it's called, 21 Precepts for Embracing the Kinship Worldview, or something like Returning to Indigenous Worldview and Embracing the Kinship, or something like that. But it's a fantastic book. I'm really excited about that conversation with Dr. Four Arrows. I got some really great guests coming up after that. So stay tuned, follow us, stay updated on what we got going on the podcast. And I hope, most of all, that you all continue to be willing to come on here and contribute live with your questions and your dialogues. So, all right, the Critical Social Worker is a joint endeavor between the University of Alaska Fairbanks, Department of Social Work, and A Conscious Party Productions. Today's host was myself, Christian. I didn't have a co-host, and our guest was G. Ford. You've been listening to The Critical Social Worker, a revolutionary storytelling podcast. This episode has been brought to you by the University of Alaska Fairbanks, Department of Social Work, and is a Conscious Party production. All right, your story, my story, our story. Until next time, everybody. Peace.